Hello and welcome to Reaching for the Moon, presented by Everglades Moon Local Council, Florida chapter of Covenant of the Goddess. COG supports individual works by its covens, members, and local councils. It's a vibrant network of a myriad of Wiccan and witchy resources, religious support, friendships, service opportunities, and more. To find out more, visit our website, emlc.net, our Facebook page, facebook.com/EvergladesMoon, or Twitter, @EMLCTweets.
Hey everyone, this is Lady Bridget, and welcome to episode 18 for Imbolc 2016. In today's podcast, Qabal brings us FooDoo and shares the secrets of making delicious scones. Be sure and check out the show notes on our website at emlc.net for the recipe and the pictures he refers to. After that, we will hear from Shaylee with Nice Witch and her thoughts on technology and ritual. By the way, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. It can be controversial, so please feel free to drop us a comment on the website about your experiences using tech in your rituals. Also, Lord Riekin continues the medicinal uses of kitchen spices in alphabetical order with the letters P, Q, R, and S. And after that, I will share with you some more tarot tips, this time on choosing the right deck for you. Of course, we will also have music. So let's get started with Pandie's Pagan projects, as Alpandia shows us how easy it is to add herbs and oils to our candles. Hope you enjoy.
Hi there, this is Alpandia, and it's time for another Pandie's Pagan project. Everywhere the days are growing longer and the nights are growing shorter, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere. Our ancestors helped the sun gain strength by lighting candles. For our project this go-around, we'll be making some very special candles to help the sun get stronger. To do this project, you will need a pillar candle of any color, though white is a really good choice for this project. Taper candles that are a solid color the whole way through. These could be birthday candles, Hanukkah candles, or even 7-day candles if you're careful. You just need candles that are a solid color and not a color on top of a white core. And finally, glitter, herbs, and oils as you want. First, put down some foil or parchment paper as this gets messy. You want to stay away from newspaper because in my experience, they stick to the candles and it's impossible to get them off without ripping everything. If you want to inscribe something onto your candle, now would be a good time to do it. This way, your intent will get sealed in with the melted wax. Next, light the tapers or 7-day candles and get them melting. As they're melting, you'll be dripping the colored wax onto your pillar candle. I tend to start by allowing the tapers to drip down along the edge to get some really nifty wax tendrils down the pillar. You know the ones I'm talking about, those ones that during ritual you feel will get all over your altar cloth. That's what we're going for here. You can use different colored candles to make your drips. Once you've got some great drips all along the sides of the candle, fill the top towards the wick with wax from your tapers. While the wax is still wet, you can sprinkle herbs or glitter on it. Be mindful with herbs though, as they can act as a second wick and cause more fire than you're after. I personally use ground herbs to avoid this. Let the wax cool, then anoint your candle for your intent with your oil. If your intent is to get the sunshine flowing, for example, you might use citrus oils or some oil you've made specifically for this purpose. After you've got it all oiled up, you can then glitter and herb it if you didn't do it during the wet wax phase. I take a two-pronged approach to glitter. Some goes in the wet wax, some goes on the oiled candle. Finally, charge the candle for your intent, then light it. Your room will soon be filled with the golden energy of the sun, the amazing scent of your oils, and the glow from the flame on your glitter. You can use this candle decorating technique for any sort of candle project. Whether you're making candles for other Sabbats, altar candles for gods and goddesses, or presents for your witchy friends, these candles are simple to make, yet filled with great creative energy. Visit our website, www.emlc.net, and share the pictures of your candle creations, or post them to our Facebook page. You'll find us under Everglades Moon Local Council. That's it for now, crafty witches. Have a blessed Imbolc.
Hi, I'm Qabal, and this is FooDoo. So I was going to make something else for this podcast, and then I made some scones. And because I love scones, now it looks like we're going to be talking about them. So scones are essentially a combination of a quick bread and a pie dough that can be either savory or sweet. And really the difference between the American and the British version comes down to the amount of sugar. And I happen to prefer the British version, which is only slightly sweet and resembling more of an American biscuit than triangular cookies, even though I happen to cut them into triangles. They can be eaten as they are or served with jam for low tea or breakfast. And the recipe that we'll go over today parallels very closely the British version. It's actually a cream scone that we used to serve at our Imbolc ritual for cakes and ale. I still like my scones cut into triangles, like I said, but you can cut them into circles for low tea in order to fill them. So the basic recipe with no lies, because this one is ours, is as follows. 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 4 tablespoons of sugar, a half teaspoon of table salt. Now if you use kosher salt, make it a heaping half tablespoon. 5 tablespoons of unsalted butter that's been cut into about 1/4 inch cubes and then frozen. And a half cup of currants, raisins, or cranberry. Actually, any dried fruit that's chopped to the size of a raisin will work. You can even use nuts, but let me come back to that in a moment when I mention modifications of the recipe. And if you like your scones totally unadulterated by a non-starch, just leave all that stuff out, all the dried fruit out. Lastly, you'll need 1 cup of heavy cream. Now, when you go buy cream, you'll likely come across different types of creams, light cream, heavy cream, whipping cream, etc. You want heavy whipping cream. These are actually, these are not marketing gimmicks. They are in fact terms referring to the amount of milk fat in the product. And whipping cream has about 30 to 35% milk fat, but heavy whipping cream will have more than 35%, and sometimes it's as high as 40%. The more fat, the richer the product, and so that heavy whipping cream is going to make a very rich scone. Now, a couple of things to know about the technique before we get into the recipe. You want the final product to have a cake-like crumb, but a very firm consistency. And to do that, it relies on the same technique, or scones rely on the same technique used in making pie doughs. Low amounts of liquid, high amounts of fat, and minimal or no handling. The last part means no kneading at all whatsoever. And why we're doing that is actually to not create any gluten in the dough. When you add water to flour and you start kneading it, that's when you start creating the gluten. So because we're using the heaviest of creams, we're avoiding including more water than necessary. Also, you want the flour to be processed with the butter until you have the consistency of a cornmeal, and with a few slightly larger lumps of butter flakes. This protects the flour again from making too much gluten. So it will give the dough a bit of flakiness and crunch. Now, for the modifications to that basic recipe, it's amenable to adding other kinds of flavoring. For example, you can add a little bit of vanilla if you want, a half teaspoon or so. You can also think about changing your flavoring and adding, say, the rind of a lemon or the rind of an orange to make it more citrusy. What you can't add will be anything that substantially increases the moisture content of the dough. So fresh fruit, for example, something like strawberries or peaches, they just won't work in this preparation. But any kind of essence, like almond essence, will work fine. In a savory version, you could even add, for example, rosemary and cut back on the sugar, and you can make a really nice scone that's a little salty with a good rosemary flavor. You also can't add things like chocolate chip. It won't end well, I tell you. Chocolate chip will have too much fat in there, and the chocolate chip won't have any kind of protection to prevent it from burning. So what you'll have to do is, if you do want to add chocolate chips, you want to modify the dough so it's slightly wetter, and you also want to drop the temperature a bit. So you might think about adding a tablespoon of water, as well as lowering the temperature of the oven to about 400. Finally, British scones, like I said, they're served for low tea, but some of the ones that I've seen will actually be fluffier. And if you want a fluffier scone, basically you double the amount of baking powder. And so the recipes in Britain that you'll come across are 1 tablespoon of baking powder to 1 cup of flour, essentially. Now, if you do modify the recipe in this direction, I think that you'll want to cut the scones into circles, and you'll also think about making 16 of them rather than making 8 triangles. Now, to get started, like I have in the first image, you want to pre-measure everything so that you have all your ingredients laid out. In French, it's called the mise en place, which is putting everything in its place as you start cooking. And then once that you have that, you'll want to preheat your oven to 425. And you'll also want to let it go a full 15 minutes before you get started on the rest of the recipe. And what you're doing there is you're making sure that your oven is fully at temperature, so that when you're ready to put the scones in, you know that you're at 425. And even though the oven temperature might go off letting you know that it's ready, it doesn't mean that the oven is really fully ready. So giving it that extra 15 minutes will kind of guarantee that that's there, that you're at that temperature. Now the first step is combine the flour, salt, and sugar. You can use a food processor. I happen to use a food processor and pulse it a few times, but if you don't have a food processor, a whisk will do, and frankly your hand will work fine. When you're ready and you have that all mixed together, you can add the butter. Again, a food processor will work. You'll want to pulse it until it gets the consistency of a lumpy cornmeal. But if you don't have a food processor, again, you can use a pastry blender and cut the butter in, or ultimately you can just use your hands. Any of those is fine. And when you're ready, like you see in step 3 of the images, mix in the currants or whatever dried fruit you have. The next step is going to be adding the cream, and you can see that from step 4 in the images that we have. Now, adding the cream is a process. I suggest that you start by adding half a cup of the cream rather than the whole thing at once. Add half a cup and stir gently, and then wait a few moments, maybe 30 seconds or so. What you're doing is that you're hydrating the flour, and you're hydrating it just enough so that it's wet enough. And humidity can make that process a little tricky. And because humidity fluctuates a lot down here in South Florida, we want to be cautious with this. Actually, anywhere there might be humidity, the flour can absorb water from the air. And so 1 cup of cream doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to use that entire amount. So only add the remaining cream a little bit at a time, and step 5 will show you what the mixture kind of looks like. It's a little dry there, but it's almost there. And you want the dough to end up just a little wet, but not too much, like you see in step 6 of the image. And this go around, I ended up using only 3/4 of a cup of heavy cream, so 1/4 of the cream was unused. In other parts, some place that might be drier, you might end up using even more of the cream. The flour can become very dry, so you just want to add a little bit at a time until you get the right moisture there. Now I put the dough, once it is ready, once it is mixed, I put the dough in a cake pan, an 8-inch cake pan actually, just to get a nice round shape and make it easier, and then I tap it out of the cake pan and get it ready to cut. You can skip that, obviously. You can make your own round shape. Make it about 8 inches in diameter, and then you cut the dough into 8 pieces lengthwise. So the easiest thing to do there is just cut it once through the diameter, go 90 degrees, cut again, and then cut those in half. Now the next step you certainly don't have to do, but I like the scones to have a slightly brown crust on them. And to do that, I will brush some cream on them before they go into the oven. You can also sprinkle a little bit of sugar if you want a slight sweetness to the tongue as you're eating them. Once in the oven, they're going to be done in about 12 minutes. And I happen to flip the whole thing around once for even browning. So at about 6 minutes, I take them out, flip them around, put them back in. Once that they're done, they're going to need to cool in a wire rack for just a few minutes. And in step 11 of the images, I did a close-up look of what the crumb should look like. It should have kind of a crunchy, and it should have a cake-like look, but it should be kind of crunchy. Now, if you double the amount of baking powder, you're going to get a much lighter scone, and so that crumb is going to look a lot airier, and it will be a much fluffier scone. They can be served warm or at room temperature. They're excellent with tea or coffee, and jam goes really well with them. That's really it. I hope you give them a try, and happy Imbolc.
Firefly came to visit last night, dressed up all in silvery light. She flickered through my flame and decided that she'd stay. She spied the drum there at my feet and said, "My love, would you play for me?" She and I and the fire made three, so I said I'd find a way. Flicker and flame, I said I'd find a way. Flicker and flame, I said I'd find a way. I tapped my drum just to hear her tone, but I never did like to play alone. Well, my hands found a doom and my fingers rat-a-tat, and the song began to play. Flicker and flame, the song began to play. Flicker and flame, the song began to play. Firefly danced and rode the flame, and I watched the stars do much the same. The trees stood still, but I swear I heard applause. Firefly asked if she could join in, and I said, "Whenever you'd like to begin." She cleared her throat, and she stretched her wings, and there was this dramatic pause. She flickered on, and then she flickered off. She flickered back on with a little cough. She took a sip of my wine, and we traded off till the night turned into day. Flicker and flame, the night turned into day. Flicker and flame, the night turned into day. The sun drew near and we rubbed our eyes, and we each nodded a sleepy goodbye. And I hope to see her again some night if I ever come back this way. Flicker and flame, if I ever come back this way. Flicker and flame, if I ever come back this way. Flicker and flame, if I ever come back this way.
That was Flicker and Flame by Mama Gina from her album Goddess Kissed. You can find out more about Mama Gina and purchase her music on mamaginamusic.com. That's MAMAGINA music.com.
Hello, my name is Shaylee, and welcome to Nice Witch, a Miss Manners segment for all Wiccans, witches, and pagans alike. Today's topic is technology and ritual. To be or not to be a techno-witch? That is the question. In modern times, with smartphones, smartwatches, fitness trackers, and those wonderfully backlit tablets, we are surrounded by technology. But as witches, we used to strongly believe technology did not belong in ritual. This is no longer true of all of us. Some of us have begun to use and even enjoy some aspects of technology in our magical lives. I happen to be one of those witches. I love using my iPad in ritual, especially at night. Why struggle to read something by candlelight when the whole thing can be easily read with a small little tablet that goes dark when I want it to and lights up when I need it? Other technology also seems to be making it past ritual borders. Fitness trackers are worn, possibly even forgotten while in circle. Others bring in cell phones even when they don't need it, either because they feel that they can't live without them, or because they have some reason that they feel that they can't be without them at that moment. Skyping or video calling during ritual to connect with others has also become a thing. Sometimes the use of tech is met with success, and sometimes with complete failure. Either way, what we can say is techno-witches are becoming a thing. But not everyone has embraced technology, so don't expect to see any tablets or phones in ritual. Many witches still believe technology has no place in sacred circle, and this should be respected. Even some of us that have begun to embrace tech in circles do not approve of all technology in sacred space. I myself believe Skype and video calls during ritual is taking things a bit too far. So when is it okay to bring technology into circle? I would say that if you are a guest, even if you see technology being used,
the safest course is to assume it is not okay. If you must have some tech device with you, such as a cell phone, keep it silent. Do not attempt to use it in ritual space, and be respectful of the fact that this is not your circle. You are a guest. Technology, when embraced, such as tablets, should only be used by those running the ritual, such as the high priest, the high priestess, or others with active roles in the ritual you are participating in. They are the only ones who can determine when or if they want to use technology in their ritual. Of course, you can always ask for permission if you want to take a photo, or if you find yourself in unique circumstances that might require you to possibly use technology. In this ever-changing world, we should always be adaptable to any situation. Just as we are adaptable, I believe magic has begun adapting and accepting technology, which is why our phones, tablets, fitness trackers, and other medically necessary devices no longer seem to fry in ritual with the regularity that they used to. Some of us have even managed to record our rituals. Just check out YouTube if you don't believe me. Maybe our acceptance and adaptation to tech has something to do with it, and maybe technology is becoming magical itself. However far technology goes in ritual, and how much of it we choose to accept in our own magical practices will be determined in the years to come. But for now, in its blooming years, we must respect each other's choices. So remember, whether we are all gathering to honor the gods, celebrate the seasons, mark the turning of the wheel, perform rituals, simply to enjoy each other's company, or whatever the reason may be, we are gathering, and we need to be considerate of each other. So enjoy yourselves, and remember to be a nice witch.
Hello everyone, this is Lady Bridget with Tarot Tips. Today's tarot tip is going to be on choosing a deck. Now obviously if you're an experienced and professional reader, you've already chosen a deck. So this is more primarily aimed at those who are getting started or who have a little bit of frustration in getting the right deck for them. I know sometimes part of the battle of learning to read tarot isn't memorizing all of the meanings, because actually that comes better with use. Part of reading the tarot, it's designed to open up your psychic centers. It's designed to be a tool that taps into your own intuitive knowledge, or some people believe that it taps into the great unconscious of mankind and the human race, or even of the race of consciousness of Gaia itself, which would include all of the creatures. And I'm not going to get into a long philosophical discussion about it, but I just want to let you know that it's a tool that taps into something that gives you answers that you may or may not already have, and certainly that the person you're reading for may or may not already have. And how this actually works is pretty much a mystery. It's magic, and that's okay, because we like to work with magic. But the way that tarot works is by constant repetition. It's by practice. It's by getting a deck that speaks to you. And sometimes that can be difficult. Now, years ago, you weren't able to look at all of the pictures on the deck. Sometimes if you were lucky and you went to a store, they would have a few decks on display, or they would have a couple that you could thumb through and actually look at the pictures. But decks come sealed. They come sealed for a reason. They don't want you thumbing through them. They don't want you getting your greasy handprints all over them. They don't want your energy on the cards. So it's on a metaphysical level as well as a practical level. Nobody wants to buy something that looks a little shop worn. So some stores would have a couple of decks that they would keep just for people to look through so that they could help you decide. But in a lot of cases, the deck would be sealed and you would be looking at the front cover, maybe the back cover, maybe a picture or two on the back, and kind of trying to make a decision that way. And to be honest, that is probably the worst way to choose a deck. These days, you should be able to go online on the internet and find almost any deck in its entirety. All of the pictures are online. So it is fantastic. That is a wonderful tool. You can't touch the deck online, obviously, but you can at least look at the pictures and you can decide, wow, this deck really, I like the pictures. I like the colors. It speaks to me. I could tell a story with this. They're pretty, or you could say this deck has too much yellow, or this deck is dark. It's kind of depressing. Or sometimes you'll find a deck and you go, oh my God, what is that supposed to be? And you'll look at the caption and you'll be like, I don't know. That just doesn't seem like it says temperance to me. Or that's supposed to be Judgment Day? What are they doing there? If that's your reaction, don't buy that deck. Unless, of course, you like to collect strange decks. And I'll get into that later. So basically what you're looking for is a deck that you enjoy looking at. That's your first step. Do I like what I see? Do I like the pictures? Could I lay these pictures out and tell a story? What a great idea, right? That's how you're going to be learning to read the tarot anyway. And that's what you're going to be doing with the tarot, is basically telling a story. So you want one where the pictures actually look like they're telling a story already. That's a very good start. Yule's just passed. You let it be known that you wanted a new deck, or that you're thinking about reading tarot, and one of your good friends has presented you with a tarot deck. What do? Well, obviously, first you say thank you. Secondly, you open the deck and see if this is something that you can work with. Even try working with it a little bit to see. Unfortunately, I would have to say, no matter how good the friend is, almost all the time, the decks just aren't quite right for you. This has been my experience. Your mileage may vary, obviously. But I've been given decks that had all dragons in them. And that's wonderful. I love dragons. I work with dragons. But I can't work with this dragon deck, because putting a dragon in every single card is a little forced. And what ends up happening is that you lose some of the other symbolism that would ordinarily be in that card, because they didn't have room. I mean, you can't include all of the lilies and all of the roses and all of the towers and the pillars and the keys and all of the other little symbols that are normally in that particular card, for example, like the High Priestess card, and then stick a dragon at her feet, because there's just not enough room. There's supposed to be something else at her feet. If you read up using any of the older texts that talk about the history of the tarot, or the history of the pictures, or what all of the little symbols mean, which I highly, highly recommend that you do, because that's very different from memorizing meanings. That's learning about the symbols and understanding where they come from and what they were intended to mean, which will only open your understanding of the tarot even more. So I do highly recommend doing that. But that's the trouble with having a deck that's a specialty deck that has cats in every picture, or dragons in every picture, or, fill in the blank. Whatever your particular hobby is. Lord Riekin got one that's an herbal deck, and I have to admit I'm the one that bought it for him. And unfortunately, he can't use it for anything. I use it for teaching, so it has a purpose at least. But he can't use it for doing any kind of spell work, because according to him, the properties of the herbs don't always align with the card that they assigned it to, at least for him. Somehow they must have had some kind of meaning that they were looking at that made sense to the creator of the deck, and it may make sense to other people, but for some reason for him it doesn't make sense. And that's what's really important. Does it make sense to you? Is it okay by you? If you get a deck and has a cat in every single picture and you love it and it speaks to you and you really like cats, then go for it. Use it. Don't listen to this advice, because obviously this works for you. But it's not going to work for everybody. And a lot of times I find that it doesn't. So those are decks that are pretty. Those are decks you can use for display. Those are decks you can even use to do tarot spells with. And that's another tarot tip episode. But those may not be your first main deck. When you buy a deck, there's usually a book that'll come with it. I highly, highly recommend getting that. If you find a deck you like enough to buy the deck, then you should buy the book. It may be a little more pricey. It may double the price of what you're spending, but really, you're learning what the author's vision was. And this is so important, because it's going to help you tap into whatever resources the author of the deck was tapping into. Not just the author, but also the artist. In some cases, they're the same person, and in some cases, they're not. it's important for you to be able to have that background, as well as the background of what the little symbols mean traditionally, because this is only going to help you. Your subconscious mind is going to remember this, even if your conscious mind doesn't, and it is going to help you tap into what the meaning of that card is in that spread at that time, and those meanings are fluid. So you need to learn to be fluid as well. I know it's a tall order, but it just takes practice. When you're reading professionally, in other words, you're reading at parties, or sometimes people volunteer at a psychic fair, which is a fundraiser, in order to gain practice. That's fantastic. Go ahead and do that. When you're getting paid for reading, it's considered that you're reading professionally. When you're doing that, you're going to want to focus in on one deck and read that deck. That's going to really help you to improve your skill. If you keep trying to read with a lot of different decks, you may find that it actually hinders you, because sometimes the cards have different meanings in different decks, and they're going to have different meanings for you in different decks, and that may hinder your ability to remember or to unlock the keys that open up your psychic intuition. So my advice would be, when you're going to start reading for serious, that you're going to start reading with one particular deck and not skip around to a lot of other ones. So what do you do with that deck that somebody gave you for Yule and it just doesn't work for you? Well, hold on to it. Someday you may be teaching tarot to other people, or you may find you want to collect decks. I have dozens of decks, and I definitely do use them for teaching. When I teach tarot, I lay out all the cards of that one particular card that we're using. So if I'm teaching, say, what the High Priestess card means, I will lay out all the High Priestess cards of all the decks I own, and I will encourage my students to bring in decks that they own and lay out theirs as well. And we have them all spread out on the table, and we examine them very minutely, and we see where the symbols are the same and where the symbolisms differ. And we check out what different artists' conception of this particular card change. It's extremely enlightening. It's a great learning tool. So if you have different decks, I would hang on to them. The other thing that I want to point out to you is that when I read for other people, I use one particular deck. When I read for myself, I have to use a different deck. And here's why. Once I get to a point where I know what the cards mean intuitively, when I am reading for myself, it is a little too easy for me to see the sunny side, or whatever side I'm hoping is the outcome, and make the card mean that. And I'm being serious. I can stack the deck. So when I'm using a deck that I'm not that familiar with, when I'm using a deck that I may actually have to look it up in a book to find the meaning, it's far more valuable to me when I'm reading just for myself, because I want an actual answer. I don't want the deck to just tell me what I want to hear. And when I'm reading a deck that I use all the time, it'll tell me what I want to hear, because I'm reading for myself. And I am very invested in the outcome. When I'm reading for other people, I'm able to detach and not be invested in the outcome. This is their reading. It's not mine. I'm not in control of it. It's not going to affect me. Even if it's a family member, you have to learn to be, discerning and draw the line there. It's a little bit of self-discipline. But when I'm reading for myself, oh my God, I do care about the outcome, and I really am invested in the result, and I want a certain answer, obviously. So it's better for me to use a completely unknown, different deck that is bizarre, and I have to actually look up the meanings, because then it's a lot harder for me to make it mean something that I want it to mean. I'm going to get a much more accurate answer. So that's my practice. The other thing I do is when I absolutely need a reading and I need to know for sure, I trade readings. I get someone else to do the reading for me, and I will do a reading for them in return. And that is a great way to learn tarot also. So when you're starting out, find your deck and find a reading buddy. Get somebody that they're also starting out, or anybody actually, who's willing to trade readings with you. Maybe it's someone who's more experienced and they just need someone to read for them, or they're just willing to help you out. Either way, take it. Read for every person who you can get your hands on. Read for everyone who will sit still, because the only way that you get better at tarot is by practicing. Just like any other musical instrument or any other muscle of the body, your intuitive psychic reasoning and your tarot deck have to learn to work together. And the only way you're going to do that is by practice. So that is my tarot tip for the day. Sorry if I wandered a little bit, but to me it's all interwoven and interlocked, and it's part of the web of life and the web of the internets and the web of tarot and the web of consciousness. And I don't really see boundaries. To me they're all interconnected, and so sometimes I do ramble a bit. But anyways, hope this is really helpful to you. If you have any questions that I can specifically answer, please email me at ladybridget@gmail.com. That's LADYBRIDGET@gmail.com. Or you can also get in touch with me through the podcast on our website at emlc.net. Have a lovely day and happy reading. Lady Bridget, and I'm here with Lord Riekin, and we're going through the medicinal uses for spices in the kitchen. We've been doing this alphabetically for quite a few episodes now, and actually Lord Riekin is up to minding his P's and Q's with a couple of R's and S's thrown in there as well. Is that correct?
That's about it. Tonight we're going to go over parsley, sage, rosemary, but we won't have time for anything else.
Oh, man. I should have seen that coming.
Yeah, you should have seen it was in there somewhere.
Yeah.
All right, so we're actually going to start not with parsley, but with paprika. Paprika is a very mild capsicum, a very mild pepper. This is going to be a real short section because basically anything you could use paprika for, you could probably use cayenne pepper for better in terms of any serious medicinal use. What it is it's really high in all kinds of nutrients, particularly beta-carotene. Paprika is primarily used as a coloring agent. A little pinch will dye a whole lot. Well, that coloring agent, is beta-carotene, and it gets converted to vitamin A in the body.
And that's good for the eyes.
And that's good for the eyes, and it's good for all kinds of metabolic purposes and everything else. It's also high in iron and a lot of other nutrients. What would I use it for? Well, I would probably sprinkle it in a cut to stop bleeding because it has just the right kind of mix of things in it, because, you're going to put pepper in to stop bleeding, but that's going to hurt. No, actually, as we've gone over before in peppers, pepper is actually used for pain relief. Once you get over the little shock, it's going to stop the pain quicker, but it'll help to, if you got a cut, it'll help to stem the bleeding.
So you can put paprika on it.
Yeah, but other than that, it's just high in, it's something good to add to your food because it's really high in a bunch of nutrients, particularly, like I say, the beta-carotenes, which are antioxidants, and you have to have beta-carotene in order to produce vitamin A in the body and such, and it'll metabolize that way. That's it for paprika. Boop, told you, short and sweet. Now we go on to parsley. One of our biggies. You got all kinds of, parsley is great for your health. Probably not as much as you might think, although it is great for your health. Again, we've got to look at the nutrient side of it. My gosh, it's full of nutrition. 554% of the necessary vitamin K, 54% of the vitamin C, 14% of vitamin A. If you take about a half cup of fresh chopped in the food. But it's full of volatile oils. It's full of flavonoids. The volatile oils, many of them inhibit cancers and inhibit tumor formation. The flavonoids are high antioxidants. Vitamin B, B3, and B1, very strong on it. Parsley is full of folic acid, which is good for your heart health. When I think of parsley, I think of blood cleanser more than anything else. Urinary tract infections, constipation, kidney stone prevention, gas, anemia, high blood pressure. If you get an insect bite and you've got a fresh plant growing in the house, like most people tend to, you chew a leaf of it a little bit and stick it on the insect bite, and it'll help to relieve the itch and reduce the swelling and everything else.
In fact, most of the remedies that you're mentioning, most of the properties you're mentioning seem to be with the oil. So does that mean that the dried parsley is really not good?
Well, fresh chopped parsley is the best way to get the best benefit of any of this. I'm not sure that a parsley tea would have all that much effect, except if you have an upset stomach. And of course, it would be a parsley tea would be better if you were worried about kidney stones. I would probably brew up some parsley tea every day.
But when they put the parsley on your plate as...
Eat it. I always do.
Yeah, what do they call that when they put it on the plate? Garnish, yeah.
But supposedly it's what it does. The reason it's there, is other than just looking good, is to be a palate cleanser and a breath freshener.
So
and
eat it.
Of course, eat it. Particularly if you save it to the end of the meal and eat it, it certainly does freshen the breath, and it certainly does cleanse the palate. It does exactly what it's claimed to do. The dried parsley that you find in your spice rack, used to make a tea, and the tea is good for kidney stones and gas. Okay, so we're going to go on to black pepper. And of course, with black pepper, you have white pepper. Because what's the difference between black pepper and white pepper? Well, black pepper is the unripe fruit. You harvest the pepper fruit unripe, dry it, and that's what gives you black pepper. White pepper is when you let the fruit ripen, and then you pick the ripe fruit and you rub off the outer rind, and you're using the center of the pepper to grind into spice. And the thing is, the unripe dried fruit is more powerful, it's stronger in its flavor, which is why it's gotten to be so, you use the unripe when you want a stronger pop on in your spice, and you use the white when you want a more mellow spice.
Or if you're making a white soup or a white sauce and you don't want black
mellowed.
specks in it. I appeal.
For me, I tend to say black pepper is times 10. When I am making a number of different herbal concoctions, I will throw in a couple of peppercorns, and it just pops up everything. It's just times 10. Black pepper is an excellent antibiotic. And so to preserve, say if I make a garlic flavored olive oil, I'm going to drop a handful of dried peppercorns into the bottle to keep it from going rancid. I don't know why it works, but it does really well. Medicinally speaking, black pepper, here you would be either lightly crushing or leaving them whole, make some tea. Stomach upset, bronchitis, it's supposed to be good for cancer. Ground up black pepper or white pepper can be sprinkled on skin eruptions like scabies or other open sore type things. You can sprinkle it on because it has a really strong antibiotic properties, and will help heal eruptions of that nature. Now, I do want to say one other thing, because we are in South Florida. Okay? There's black pepper and there's white pepper. And every now and then you'll hear all about pink pepper. Okay? Pink pepper is our ever so beloved, and I say that with great sarcasm, our Brazilian pepper, or Florida holly, but we're going to call it Brazilian pepper here, okay? Shaylee terebinthus. And it was the fad some years ago, and it's still now a staple everywhere you go, to see the pink peppercorn, which is the dried fruit of the Brazilian pepper, which is the most obnoxious and invasive weed that we have in South Florida and threatens to take over everything. But I just want to caution you that the pink pepper, as it were, has no relationship to the black and white pepper. And in fact, Shaylee brasiliensis, or Shaylee terebinthus, it used to be called Shaylee brasiliensis, but they changed it to terebinthus, is a relative, is in the cashew family. And people with an allergy, a nut allergy, a tree nut allergy, not a peanut allergy, that's a ground nut, but a lot of people have a tree nut allergy. And if somebody talks you into using a peppercorn blend that has the pink peppercorns in it, you're liable to find yourself with swollen eyes and swollen mouth and a swollen throat, and you might be, using an EpiPen or being hauled off to the hospital.
And that would be why.
And that would be why. You may not even know why you suddenly had this reaction, but that's because the pink peppercorns, the Brazilian pepper, the pink pepper is a member of the cashew family, and it can trigger a pretty bad anaphylactic reaction. So don't do it, okay? Unless you're sure you have no reaction like that and you like the flavor. It is a very spicy flavor. I mean, it is a very valid spice as long as you don't have any allergies of that nature. Okay, now we're going to go on to rosemary. Now we're going to be real clear here that we're going to use the rosemary that is in the bottle in your spice rack. We're not talking rosemary oil here. That's a whole different ball game. I mean, I could not live without a bottle of rosemary oil because it is the best stress reliever I have. I just, a little bit, and it relieves stress. It also relieves sinuses. It can ease a sore throat and do all kinds of things, but that's not what we're talking about here.
So you're talking about inhaling.
We're talking about inhaling it. Now,
right.
Of course, you could take rosemary leaves and you could put them in some water and you could simmer that and you could breathe it in if you were having a sinus attack, if you had a cold or something like that, if you had a sore throat. Yeah, of course, you can just breathe it in. Well, what are you going to do with the water when you're done with it? Well, if you don't do anything else with it, use it to rinse your hair because there's nothing like rosemary tea, to rinse your hair and your skin with. It's really great for your skin and your hair. If you have cold sores and things, you can soak a piece of cloth in the tea and you can put it on the sore and it'll help cure and dry up the sore a lot faster. Taking the tea for flatulence, for indigestion, to increase menstrual flow. You can take the tea for gout, for cough. You can take the tea for headache. But here's, you can take it for, you can take tea for high blood pressure. But again, it's not the best thing in the world for something like that. Eczema, though, taking a tea made from rosemary is very good for eczema and other skin diseases.
Externally. As a wash. I gotcha.
Aromatherapy, well, let's just stick your nose over the pot and stick. Aromatherapy, I guess scientifically it's out, but for me, it's in. I've been using rosemary oil for aromatherapy forever.
Absolutely.
But rosemary for hair and skin, good use. If you needed to use the tea to clear your sinuses, to clear up a stuffy head or something like that, don't waste it. Don't throw the water out with the baby. Keep the water. I don't know what you want to do with the baby, but rinse your hair with it, rinse your face and your body with it. And okay, next one is saffron. 6 to 8 weeks of daily drinking of saffron tea may help in the improvement in psoriasis. Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks. I think the goal and purpose behind this particular series is what to do when you're stuck in the house. There's a snowstorm up north and you can't get out the door. Well, if you can't get out the door for 6 weeks, you got bigger problems than flaky skin.
Yeah.
Okay, so again,
Although, I see a lot of commercials on TV for all of these medicines for psoriasis and flaky skin and all that stuff. We just saw one tonight. And basically the side effects are like, could cause death, could cause all kinds of stuff. This won't. No. So on the plus side, if you were taking something for psoriasis and you wanted to use this wash as well, or the rosemary water as a wash as well to supplement that, it wouldn't hurt. No. But you should probably check with your doctor to make sure there's no interactions that you don't know about.
As far as I'm concerned, saffron is nothing more than a dye in your
thought.
Food. I found all this stuff, the improvement in psoriasis. It can be used for insomnia, cancer, hardening of the arteries, cough, stomach gas, erectile dysfunction, baldness, muscle pain. But in the case of saffron, it says, you have to take it internally for 6 to 8 weeks to get any effect.
That's a little too long.
Yeah, before you start seeing an effect. It's like, really? Let's just...
And it's not cheap.
No, let's just move on.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to sage. But at any rate, just wanted to throw it in there. But we're going to go on to sage. And I want to be clear here that we're talking about common sage, Salvia officinalis. Why do I want to make that distinction? Because there's something called Spanish sage, which is Salvia ladendulifolia, and it's much more powerful. It's like, well, if it's more powerful, isn't that better? Well, the thing here is that common sage reduces blood pressure, and Spanish sage increases blood pressure.
Oh.
So right then and there, that's enough for a warning bell to me to say, we're talking about the one thing, we're not talking about the other.
And be sure.
Okay, so not the Spanish sage, but just your common, everyday Salvia officinalis, from the Mediterranean that we've been using for 3,000 years. The most important thing, and I was a little bit surprised by this, and I've got to try it for myself, sage tea, as little as 1 cup of sage tea, has an immediate effect and impact on memory, alertness, and attention in adults.
And I'm assuming you mean beneficial impact.
Yes.
I had to ask.
I guess there's a point there, yeah. Okay. Sage, the primary thing in it is thugenol, which can be poisonous in large quantities. Okay? It can have a bad reaction. And anyone that has a seizure-type malady, such as epilepsy or any of the other seizure-type problems, probably should not take sage tea. Sage in culinary amounts cooked in food is generally recognized as safe even if you have a seizure malady, but taking a sage tea if you have a seizure malady could trigger an episode. It could trigger an epileptic fit, okay, a seizure. But in normal people, sage tea, 1 cup, 1 time, boom, an increase in memory, alertness, and attention span.
Well, I'm going to try that tomorrow morning, and I will let you know.
Yeah, I might just too. Soaking a rag in sage tea can be put on a cold sore. It can be used as treatment in the skin. Sage tea can ease hot flashes of menopause. You can let me know about that too. It's good for gas, bloating, and digestion. What isn't good for gas, bloating, and digestion of all these medicinal herbs that we've been using? That's it. Again, I want to emphasize that the thugen, the active ingredient, can be poisonous in large quantities,
So
medicinal qualities.
When you say large quantities, you need to be more specific.
Well, it's a little vague exactly what a large quantity is, but they're saying if it's in a medicinal quantity. In other words, sage is absolutely safe in culinary quantities. You can't possibly put enough sage in your food to cause you a problem.
So if you take a teaspoon and you brew 1 cup of tea, you're safe.
That's a safe amount.
Okay.
Certainly that's a safe amount.
Okay.
But if you start getting sage oil and putting drops of sage oil in water and stirring it up and drinking it, you could be crossing the line. Okay? Because you're really only, would you be taking 1/10 of a drop. And just for the fun of it, summer savory.
Oh, dear.
Which is practically nothing. It says a tea made of summer savory could be used for coughs, gas, intestinal cramps, indigestion, diarrhea. And if you have fresh savory, you can crush it and put it on insect bite. And that's about it for summer savory. A lot of these were not what you would call heavy hitters, except for the sage.
Oh, the pepper.
And pepper, parsley. I mean, I use pepper throughout all kinds of decoctions and concoctions that I make.
Right.
It is just my habit to throw in some peppercorns, and I have seen its beneficial effect over the years.
It kicks things up a notch.
Well, it kicks all my medicinal uses of herbs up a notch or 2 or 3, and it preserves things like some of the oils that I make much better. Don't notice any ill effect, or it's like, you smell like pepper. I've never had anybody say that, so...
It's interesting because magically, when you add pepper to some kind of a spell, it also increases the speed of the spell. It kicks things up a notch. So it's good. The magical and the medicinal properties line up.
Yep.
Doesn't always happen that way.
Nope.
But thank you very much for giving us another enlightening session.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. Before we begin our last segment of this episode, we'd like to thank you for listening. Putting a podcast together is a time-consuming labor of love, but knowing that someone is listening to our hard work and hopefully gaining something from it makes it worthwhile. Would you let us know you like the podcast by going to our website at emlc.net, click on the podcast tab, and write a comment. Tell us what you like and what you'd like to hear more of on our podcast. And even better, why not leave us a rating on iTunes? Ratings help us become more visible to more people. It's not about ego, it's all about service. Thank you, and blessed be.
Our last selection for this episode is Turning Wheel, which is my song from my album In Her Sacred Space. You can find out more about my music on my website, www.ladybridget.com. Blessed be.
Blessed be 3 Samhain starts our new year. Spirits of the dead are near. Divination tools are easiest to use. Veils between the worlds are sheer. Yule is when the Sun King dies, to be reborn in winter skies. Homemade gifts are exchanged in honor of his birth. Winter solstice on the earth. At Imbolc, candles burn, strengthening the sun's return as we bless the seeds and prepare for the spring when the earth is green again. Equinox in the spring, Mother Earth awakening as we plant what we want to mature throughout the year. So good fortune and good cheer. Beltane seas, maples rise, just a penis in disguise. Colored ribbons represent our wishes and our dreams. Celebrate fertility. Litha comes at June's end. Solar apex now descends. Sun King's course is at its yearly height. Longest day and shortest night. Lammas is for corn and grain. Mother Goddess ripe again. Her consort shed his blood for summer's bloom. Now we honor our Lord Loon. The wheel it turns another notch, which brings us to fall equinox. Thanks for the blessings, grapes are on the vine. Mabon is the harvest time. We create sacred space with our minds in altered states, with the earth, air, fire, water, spirits in a circle.